Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll talk about the ever-fluid situation in the conflict between Israel and Iran. Every minute, something or the other happens which escalates the conflict. Now, we don't know where it's going. And in the context of Iran, Iran has actually lost a lot of support in that part of the world. The Hezbollah has been crippled. Assad has gone. The Houthis are attacking ships of the Americans and others. Iraq, too, is no longer in a position to support big time to the regime in Iran. Iran's internal problems have increased. The inflation rate has gone up to about 30-40%. And yet, Iran is fighting back. The Israelis have actually targeted Iran in a big way. They have killed their scientists. They have killed their military personnel. Yet, Iran is not relenting. Khamenei is saying that we're going to fight on. They have fired about 400 missiles. They have, I believe, 1,300 of them. So every minute the situation is evolving. And we're going to discuss what impact that has on the global economy, what impact that has on India, because a large part of our trade is dependent from the Hormuz. I got information that 3 ships have been burnt in the Hormuz. Maybe right, maybe wrong, because a lot of this is also disinformation. So we don't know what's true and what's not true. But if the oil prices go up to $120 or even $150, it's going to have a huge impact on India. Inflation will rise, our transportation costs will rise. We import 80% of our crude oil. It impacts our economy big time. It impacts our pharmaceutical industry. It impacts our chemical industry. It is going to reduce the rate of growth. It also impacts the global economy. So we're going to discuss all this with 3 exceptional guests that I have today, all former Foreign Service officers and who have actually very, very familiar in this part of the world. So first of all, let me introduce Shivshankar. Thank you very much, Shiv, for being here with me. You can't come here before several times, but thanks once again. You're here because, you were the Foreign Secretary between 2006 and 2009, and you were National Security Advisor. 2010 to 14, you were Ambassador to High Commissioner to Pakistan. You were Ambassador to China, to Sri Lanka. And of course, you've written a lot on foreign policy, so thank you for being here. Talmiz, 1974 batch, expert in West Asia, Kuwait, Iraq, Yemen, CG Jeddah, and ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE. So you're exceptionally familiar with this part of the world, apart from the fact that you were in New York and London also. And ever since 2011, I've been watching you, writing articles and making statements. Thank you for being here. Vivek, thank you very much again for being here. You've been sort of familiar with Cairo, Abu Dhabi, Washington. You've been in Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan. You write such fascinating articles. So thank you. But let me start with you, Shivshankar. What's going to happen in this part of the world?
Well, if you assume that they're rational and logical and not suicidal, I think you can expect, at least this is not going to end tomorrow or day after, because they claim to do it for 3 reasons. Or they claim for 2 reasons, but there's probably a third. They claim to do this because, at least Mr. Netanyahu claims that Iran was about to make a bomb. Frankly, on its own, according to Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister, Defense Minister, Chief of the IDF, Israel cannot do more to the Iranian bomb-making effort than delay it by a few weeks, because most of their enrichment facilities and so on are underground, Fordo, for instance. Yes. If the Americans have the capability to hit those underground sites, but that would delay Iran by a few years, maybe. And so I'm not sure that that's really the goal. So it seems to me more likely that the real goal is regime change in Iran, to topple the government. Is that likely? It's possible, but you never know what's going to come, even if they do achieve it. Right. There's no guarantee. You look at Iraq, and I think the results are totally unpredictable. They managed to topple the regime. And Iran is a different kettle of fish. It's 90 million people
Yes.
in a country the area of France and Germany put together.
Yes.
I mean, this is not some small
And a
little
great
state.
civilization at that.
And with a pride. And
a
frankly, attacks like this will unite people
Correct.
rather than separate them.
It actually has happened in Iran.
And you can see that.
You can see that happen.
Third motive, I assume, is for Mr. Netanyahu to stay in power in Israel. That I think he might achieve. But I'm not sure that the first two are achievable. So, and much of what the Israelis are doing seems designed to bring the Americans in to do the job that they've started.
Right.
For the last 3 years, if you look at the context, Israel and the US, complicit, have really tried to remake the geopolitics of the Middle East and to reassert Western hegemony. All the things you mentioned, Syria, Assad topple, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iranian proxies, etc. The attack on Hamas, ethnic cleansing, slaughter in Gaza. You know, all this is part of a larger, and now Iran, the main. So I don't see this ending very quickly. How far it will go, whether it will become a broader regional war and so on, that I'm not so sure.
The Americans have so far not directly got into it.
And, well, you can't be more direct than you shoot down Iranian missiles, you have, there are 70,000 Americans in Israel.
Right.
There are American troops manning Patriot batteries and so on, which are part of Israel's defense against the Iranians. There's no way that the Israelis could have done what they do without going through airspace, refueling, various kinds, the intelligence, for instance. I mean, the Americans are part of this already. They might keep saying we're not part of it because they're not doing it so far. But the Israelis have, I think, managed to slowly get them more and more involved. And you heard Mr. Trump issuing ultimatums saying that threatening actually the supreme leader, Mr. Khamenei.
We can kill him. We
could kill him, but we haven't done it so far, and demanding unconditional surrender.
Shocking for
And he said, we control the airspace over Tehran and Iran. And, so I wouldn't draw a distinction there between, frankly, this is coordinated and organized.
But tell me another thing, in this whole West Asia region, the Sunni regimes would be quite happy to have Iran not have nuclear weapons.
I think Talmiz is the expert, but I don't think they have much room to maneuver.
No, actually they have supported Iran in this.
verbally,
Saudi Arabia has made some statements in support of Iran. Pakistan High Commissioner, he met Khamenei, then went to the Security Council and made a statement, very strong statement, against Israel. So, I think that even they have now, at least, they are trying to support Iran and trying to attack Israel. Is that right?
I think the Gulf Arab countries would not be pleased with the destruction of Iran and its capabilities, because that would leave Israel as the regional hegemon, and it would be very oppressive for them. What this entire effort has done, that there was an implicit balance of power, which was accommodated by all the principal role players, and there were certain broad rules that you would not cross certain lines. That all conflicts used to be contained.
I see.
What Israel has done now is broken all those rules. For various reasons, we can speculate about them, personal to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is being abused by his own citizens for the failures of 7th October. He has to recover. And there is a kind of extraordinary bloodlust, a violence as an end in itself, which serves no strategic purpose that anyone can see. Even his own allies can't see that. Now you see the starvation, for example, the violation of the ceasefire agreement, and the very strict, this thing about genocide, ethnic cleansing, talk about getting rid of the people, first of Gaza, then of the West Bank. We are reaching levels of extraordinary xenophobia, for which, again, there is no precedent. Now you were having dialogue on the nuclear issue, you had 5 rounds, and suddenly you say, I want unconditional surrender, or I will kill your supreme leader. You have a very intemperate and totally uncontrollable president in the United States, I suspect that Netanyahu has learned how to press his buttons. Netanyahu is, I would say, one of the cleverest politicians in West Asia. And he knows, he's a survivor, as you know.
Yes.
He knows how to manage and manipulate Donald Trump. He plays to his ego. He has brought him in very smoothly and made him central to this
And in
entire
fact, he
enterprise.
said it is now your war. And he made a speech to that.
Absolutely. And he makes him feel good because here is the president who feels like Augustus Caesar. When he stands there, he has his parade on his birthday, he takes the salute and he says, I want unconditional surrender or else. Now, it makes him feel good. A business corporate leader does not have this charge that he has now as the President of the United States. It is an extraordinary high of power. And I think he is really enjoying himself in that.
And yet the Europeans and the global community are not responding in any statesman-like way.
See, when
to
you
this
say
crisis.
European, we either go to sleep or we get angry. They are a really pathetic bunch.
Yeah.
Each of them, separately and collectively, they have been totally emasculated by the Americans. For so long, they've had this cozy scenario of Americans taking care of their security.
But even Japan,
Japan, see, all of them have serious domestic issues. They have serious concerns of their own, up to now abdicated to the Americans. And suddenly you have this extraordinary phenomenon called Donald Trump, who says you pay for your own security. They don't have a security doctrine. They've always followed the Americans up to now. And then the EU is, of course, divided within itself.
so Iran is isolated. Iran doesn't have any support now within
No,
the
you
community.
see, it's very difficult to say they have no support, in the sense that no one is fighting on their side.
Who's supporting Iran?
There is no, I would say that
I mean, Russia and China are on the sidelines. They're not.
Israel is isolated as well.
No.
Israel is
supported
isolated
fully.
other than the Americans. As no one is fighting for somebody because the effort is to contain. We don't have a situation like 19th century Europe where you had alignments, where you had alliances, which is why it became a world war.
Right.
We don't have those kind of alliances. But we have United States, as Mr. Menon mentioned, we have United States fighting for its hegemony. And that is true. The Ukraine war and the Gulf war, this war, the Gaza war. The Israelis are doing the American job of taking care of this region, eliminating all forces of resistance and reimposing what you had in the early days of the Cold War. American hegemony all the way from the Mediterranean to Pakistan.
From my standpoint, America is losing hegemony. China is gaining hegemony. This is my own
We
perception.
can discuss that as we go
can
along.
discuss it. But Vivek, what do you think of this whole crisis? Please,
Look,
let's have your comments.
a couple of things are straight. Whether we like it or not, Donald Trump will be in power for 3.5 years and the world will have to deal with him. I don't see him going away.
Okay.
Second, no one, including the Russians and the Chinese, and certainly not the Europeans, and also I would venture to suggest all the Gulf Sunni states, wants a nuclear Iran.
Yes.
Whether that is feasible or not is a separate issue. But no one wants that.
Even the Iranians should not have nuclear weapons, according to you. If this-
I think we also, India too, has always maintained that the Iranians are signatories to the NPT.
But now they're moved, sorry to interrupt, they're now wanting to move a resolution saying that they want to opt out of the NPT.
No, that is a separate issue. But we have taken the position that they are members of the NPT and they must observe the conditionalities of the NPT. So that is our stand.
True, that is true.
Now, third point I'll tell you is this, that as of today, I don't see an option for the Americans but to go in and proceed further than what the Israelis have done with regard to the Iranian nuclear facility.
What does that mean in real terms?
In real terms, it means that they will have to use their bombs and they've got these humongous bombs to bomb the facilities in Fodor, in Isfahan, in Natanz, and elsewhere, to try to cripple Iranian enrichment to the extent possible. Now, as Shankar correctly said, if there's fissile material which is not under anyone's control, we don't know. Second, we don't know certainly the brain power that the Iranians have is something that no, it can't be taken back. It is there if they have the capacity. So it logically would seem to me that the next step for the Americans, supported by the Israelis, of course, but the Americans supported in some manner of form by the Europeans and to an extent by the Gulf states. I take Talmiz's point very seriously that the Gulf states would, and the Sunni Arab world would want a balance.
That's right.
They would want a balance of power. But I think if the balance has to be tilted, they won't like a nuclear Iran. I can share with you something that I've never forgotten. In 1997, and it goes back to, well, what, now 28 years, so I can reveal it. Mr. Gujral was foreign minister and he was in Iran. And I was JS EPA, so I was with him in Iran. And then for some odd reason, he insisted that he was going to Abu Dhabi for a talk, a brief talk, and then coming back to India. So he said that, Vivek, you come with me. So that's how I happened to be there. Otherwise, I had nothing to do with Gulf War I as Joint Secretary. As we know that unless you have something to do with it, my brief was Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. So he went and there was this meeting and all of us were there, and then the Abu Dhabi then Minister of State for Foreign Affairs requested a one-on-one meeting with Mr. Gujral. And Mr. Gujral came out of this meeting and he was ashen. So when we went to the hotel, we sort of surrounded him and we asked him, "Sir, what happened?" And he said, "You know what he told me?" He said, "With Iran, why are you people doing what you're doing with Iran?" And he used the words, "We can imagine ourselves in the same trenches with the Israelis against the Iranians." Never forget that.
Oh, I see.
This was 1997 February. So when we talk of balance between Israel and Iran, my mind always goes back to that conversation and that message which the Abu Dhabi people had sent to us at that stage. So they don't want a nuclear Iran too. Now the question is it achievable? It is at that stage that I think we are in, and I'll end this by saying that I don't see now how Donald Trump or the Americans might not, the American establishment largely might not want it, but how Donald Trump cannot go in but, quote unquote, complete partially the work as far as the facilities are concerned, Iranian nuclear facilities, that the Israelis have begun. Now, what will be the situation after that is the issue before us.
But tell me, Shankar, these nuclear facilities are underground, right? And the capability of Iran will continue to be there to manufacture a nuclear bomb. So, except for actually occupation and destruction of the regime, there is no way in which you can prevent Iran from making a nuclear bomb. And if that is to be done, then what will happen in the months or in the days ahead to come?
Well, the remarkable thing is that Iran, despite all the tension, pressure, etc., sanctions, so far has not, and Trump in his first term withdrawing from the agreement with Iran, has not so far actually moved to making a bomb. As the DNI, the US DNI, Tulsi Gabbard told Congress on the 25th of March, but they're not making a bomb, a nuclear bomb.
They said so, yes.
And they said they could do it, but they're not doing
The
it.
enrichment of uranium is up to 60% is what they have said.
But of the three elements, as we were talking, facilities, yes, the Americans have the capacity to take out remotely, bomb, whatever. But Iran has a stockpile of enriched uranium.
Yes.
Enough, people say, anything between 9, 15 bombs to make.
They say about 150 kilograms.
And as you said rightly, that cannot be neutralized. So you can't denuclearize Iran without dealing with that and dealing with the knowledge that's in their heads. And that is not something that you can
So the
just
only
wipe
way out
clean.
is occupation then.
So this is the problem. I don't think either the Americans or the Israelis are equipped to do that, which is why he keeps saying, come to the table, surrender. He wants to bring them to some kind of agreement on his terms, but he shifted the goalposts because until 3 weeks before the attacks, the negotiations between the US and Iran were on the basis that they would enrich uranium but never get it beyond a certain level. 3 weeks before, they shifted to no enrichment, which frankly, for a self-respecting regime in Iran, makes it non-negotiable.
But the Americans have agreed to
and
enrichment.
now he says it's not just no bomb, which I think most of the world would agree, but it's no enrichment at all. And he wants that internationally supervised. I mean, they'd use the IAEA and safeguards and so on and use other people to do it.
No, but I thought he had agreed to enrichment up to 20%, then up to 60%.
Yeah, but 3 weeks before,
with guarantees.
But they switched what they were doing. And they shifted the goalposts, basically, in the negotiations.
So in this context, this lunch that President Trump had with Asim Munir, does that have significance in this context?
Well, one can only speculate. I don't know what whether it was an attempt by Trump to try and again insert himself into India-Pakistan, or whether it was to use Pakistan in their strategy for the Middle East, for dealing with Iran. I have no idea. Or whether it was to introduce an element of doubt in Iranian minds about what Pakistan might do. But I assume that the Pakistanis are clever people.
No, it must be a very important occasion for Trump to miss out on the G7 and come to Washington.
Well,
and
I
have
don't
this
think
lunch.
he particularly likes the G7 either.
You reduced it to the G6 in the process. Talmiz, what thoughts you
Could I
have on
make
it?
2 comments on what Vivek said? Personal observation. As the British were leaving South Asia and West Asia, they did something. They left behind states that were inherently incapable of looking after their own security. And they would be always dependent on Western powers. I have in mind Pakistan, Israel, and all these 6 Gulf states. They're insecure. And as a result, they have enjoyed American patronage up to now. First the British and then the American. Now look at these Gulf states. Till now, they were dependent on the Americans. Even in the 1997, they were dependent on the Americans. And the Americans were supposed to be the guardians of regional security. But the Americans have been found wanting. Wherever UAE is concerned, I have one very simple observation, and with that I will dispose it off. It is on paper a country of 7 million, but it has 1 million Emiratis.
Right.
The total population of Emiratis in that country is 1 million.
That's correct.
10% or 12%. They are they are mavericks where foreign affairs is concerned. And they are very deeply engaged with the Americans. They normalize with Israel because it gets you plus points with the Americans and with the Israel lobby, and gets you the technology hub or whatever you want, the agenda that you have. You have also a kind of royal family competition with the Qataris also. All of them are deeply insecure, incapable of being on their own. They talk the language of strategic autonomy because they are disenchanted with the Americans, particularly during the period of Donald Trump, and then reinforced by the period of Biden and then Donald Trump, and now Trump again. So they are diversifying their options in this regard. So this is the first point, that these kind of conversations are very, very possible, and there is no real foreign affairs discourse where there is discussion on all that. There are certain decisions taken at the top level and they are conveyed and they live with the consequences. For example, the normalization with the Israelis. Totally, they know full well that the popular opinion, and this is my other point, popular opinion all across the Arab world, from Morocco to Yemen, is totally in favor of the Palestinians, and there is no way any monarch, including the royal family of Saudi Arabia, can now normalize. So I think we have to take a look at that. The other is with regard to balance. I think they will be, and this is my longer term view, medium to longer term view, a view that doesn't agitate politicians, but we as scholars have to look at it. There will be a role for China and Russia. I cannot imagine that this can be totally ruled out. There will be a role, and more the so-called middle powers, including the countries of the region, will assert a strategic autonomy. They will want to be associated with the Chinese and the Russians, and I believe that I don't think they want a new Cold War. And luckily Trump is not talking that language at all. He's saying he wants to have G9.
If you really look at, the Chinese are investing more and more into Saudi Arabia. In fact,
all across the region.
All across the region.
All across the region.
In fact,
investments, joint ventures.
This has resulted in the acceptance of China as a power that matters, and that with all this part of the world wants to get
all the major infrastructure projects.
Yes.
Massive investments. Also, they have cross investments.
Yes.
They encourage these people to invest in China as well. So they are bonded. Right. You have the broad rubric of the Belt and Road Initiative, but under that you have very robust engagements and very diverse engagements. None of them strike, they may not generate alarm bells, not robust military. They keep away from military because they don't want the Americans fooling around there. The Americans are already well represented. They focus on economics and diplomacy. And where you will see them succeeding over a period of time is building up their diplomatic engagements, becoming players who bring people together, what they call win-win, their mantra, win-win. I would also say that post this conflict, remember the Iran-Iraq war. The Iranians lost more than 500,000 people dead. Most of their cities were destroyed in the war of the cities. There was nobody with them, and they were totally isolated.
Right.
Even chemical weapons were used against them. They survived.
That's right.
And they are going to survive this time. I think they will look out for building up their capabilities at home. You see, what the Israelis and Americans have done is that they don't think beyond the immediate. One a megalomaniac and the other a very wily politician looking out for himself. But they don't think, what is the damage you do? You look at the kind of regime change initiatives that the Americans did in Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya. The damage is still with us.
That's true. But okay, I appreciate what you're saying, that they don't think beyond the immediate. Does India think beyond the immediate, Vivek?
Well, over the last 4 to 5 years, I find a shift in our basic approach to West Asia. My understanding was that we built bilateral relations in West Asia. We didn't get entangled with the internecine difficulties. And I think that was a wise approach. Now, we seem to be getting involved in the politics of West Asia. Mm-hmm. For instance, we've got this I2, U2, where you've got involved with the Israelis, the Americans, the UAE, etc. Yes. So then there is this huge connectivity project that we have in mind, IMEC, etc. It might pan out well, it might not pan out well. I, for one, was far more comfortable, perhaps to the comfort of the non-risk taker, far more comfortable with the old paradigm where we built relationships and we said, look, this is it. Our capacities are limited, but whatever we can do, we will do. We were building strategic ties, we were building defense ties individually, bilaterally with these countries, but not getting sort of involved in groups. Now, I agree with Talmiz that Iran can't be driven into the dust. No country can. Afghanistan hasn't been driven into the dust. That is regime change. When people talk of regime change, I'm reminded that in '79, you had Khomeini in the wings, and he came back when the Shah was removed. Today, when they talk of regime change, I really don't know what that means. I mean, who is going to come in place of the Vilayat-e-Faqih? And this is regime change. The fact that the present regime or the present clerical system in Iran is tottering has been an American dream fueled by Iranian emigres for the last 3 decades.
Yeah.
It's not something recent. We've all heard this time and again, that this is a regime which is highly unpopular, but there is simply no one there who can take its place. There can be, that thought has struck me, that there can be some people from the clerical order itself who are termed quote unquote moderates. For example, Khatami was one of them. I think Rouhani too is one. But then on the other hand, you have the Ahmadinejads. So it's not very clear on what is meant by regime change. This word is very loosely used. There are certainly no organized political forces in Iran that can step in and take over and take control over the coercive apparatus of state in Iran. So we are at a stage where I think, where the Americans, I may be wrong, but I think it's gone too far for the Americans not to come in and to start aerial bombing.
But I just wanted to find out, what is India's position in all this? We seem to be stuck in the sense that we are close to Israel. We're exceptional. We got huge collaborations with Israel on several fronts. We're close to Iran. We have the Chabar port. We have the corridor that is to be built. Now, what's going to happen to all this? And if the Straits of Hormuz are blocked, what impact? So, diplomatically, what is our position in all this?
Well, I'm amazed that we are mum on all the major issues of the day. Whether it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we abstain. Whether it's what the Israelis are doing in Gaza, UN resolutions calling for ceasefires, thrice we've abstained. We dare not call what Israel has done to Iran an attack even in our statements. I am amazed because we have a huge strategic interest in peace in this part of the world. We have 8 million people there in the Gulf and Saudi Arabia, living, working there. We depend on them for oil.
Billions of dollars.
I mean, 103 times the DFI into India in 2024 was the remittances. $125 billion we're talking about. If you look at yes, we have a huge strategic interest in Hormuz staying open. Almost a quarter of our import bill is oil and gas.
Yes.
And of that, about 40% comes, especially the LNG from Qatar, all comes through Hormuz.
That's correct.
So, and if the price goes up, I mean, think of what it does to the world economy. It'll drive world inflation around 6-7%. Think of what it'll do to us if oil prices go
we should
further.
take a proactive position in all
we
this.
should be out there pushing for peace.
Yes.
We have a strategic interest in peace in the region. We're mum. Frankly, this is a new development. There was a time, I mean, when I was ambassador to Israel, for instance, that didn't stop us from saying what we felt on the Palestinian issue, voting the way we wanted in.
No, and we were getting close to Israel.
But we were still doing all this with Israel.
Israel, yes.
We had a huge defense
why have we changed
relationship.
that position?
There still are, today Israel is our second biggest source of defense imports.
Right.
Yes, but that's not going to change because of, I mean, it's in their interest as much as it's in yours. So I don't understand why we are mum, frankly, and why we are nervous of being ourselves.
Exactly. I mean, I remember as a HRD minister, I went to Israel. We have huge collaborations, but we always took the position that, look, you cannot tax like this and you cannot throw out the Palestinians. We support their demand for a homeland.
No, Shankar, I think we have a chapeau now. And under that chapeau, we feel that once Prime Minister has articulated that, we don't have to say anything. And that chapeau is, this is not the age of war, nor of terrorism. Now, once the belief is, I'm sure in MEA, and we all have been part of MEA, belief is that he said that, what more is there to be said?
No, but you advise the Prime Minister, you always tell him that. Look,
You've just fought a
yes,
war
what is all this?
yourself.
No, but he just said this is not the age of terrorism either. I agree with you that we should be a little more forthcoming in articulating our viewpoint. There's no quarrel with that. I was only trying to find a way of why we are what we are.
No, ultimately, we lose respect. Like, one of the great things that India, why India is respected in the global community, is our ability to stand up, our moral fiber, our moral strength. That was part of our foreign policy for years and years. We just lost all that. And we're now nowhere. We're not, I'm sorry to say, despite what the Mandarins in South Bloc will say, but we're not respected in the manner in which we were everywhere in the world today.
May I make a comment on this?
Yes, please.
India has changed. Because of the change that is palpable within our national order, many things have changed following that. When you speak of the respect that we had, because there were certain core principles that animated this nation, and those principles were respected. They were a part of a very, very long legacy. It was pluralistic, it was accommodative, it was multicultural. We were also not aggressive, we were not arrogant. We were truly respected within, at that time, the non-aligned movement and now the global south. Because of changes at home. Now what has happened is, it has constrained you because you can no longer project yourself as multicultural, as pluralistic and accommodative.
Yes.
Others, for example, who took the case to the International Court of Justice? South Africa. Did we say a word?
No, we didn't, yes.
The entire case. And the International Court of Justice, about which at that time I was skeptical, look at the way they came forward. Continuously have come forward. International Criminal Court, continuously. That means those were our principles. But we are not there anymore. And that is the key. I have sensed, as an outsider, I don't meet too many people, I don't get around that much, but I spend my time in anguished reflection, and that is this, that we've lost our way. We've lost our way as a country, and we've lost our way in terms of our foreign policy.
Becoming transactional, you think, just as the Americans.
Well, transactional is part of relationships, but transactional is meaningless unless there are values. Values is the core. That gives you strength, that gives you direction, it gives you content, it gives you self-confidence. Without all that, you are astray. Sometimes you are here, sometimes you are there, you are upset with the Turks, go to Cyprus, you are upset, go to Greece. This is not foreign affairs, this is not foreign policy. Where is the strategy? Where is the thinking that goes behind all these actions? That's why no one takes you seriously. Because you are today a maverick who just goes from here to there.
Vivek, no one
without the core principle.
No one takes us seriously?
No, I think we are taken seriously. I'll make a couple of points. I think there can be no quarrel that we need to adhere to our core constitutional principles and fully. On that, there can't be a quarrel. That is what we are that is the essence of India. It is captured by the Constitution. Any deviation from that robs us, I'm not bothered about our international personality, it robs us of our inherent Indianness, as we were to call it. But I do think that there is a sense of disappointment in many circles here, that are friends in the Islamic Ummah. And I'm saying this with a great deal of sadness in some ways, did not condemn Pakistani terror or try to constrain it the way they should have. What did they do when it came to Mumbai 2008? That too has contributed to a shift in Indian thinking. That when it came to the causes of the Palestinians, we stood firm. But when it came to the massacre of our own people at the hand of Pakistani terrorist organizations, the Lashkar, the Jaish, and others, did the Islamic Ummah stand up, or did they lecture us on the treatment of our minorities when they did nothing of the sort with the Chinese? And we know how the Chinese are treating the Uyghurs. So therefore, I believe that there was a shift in the opinion of people here. And I ask myself this question, that here was a body of opinion in India which was fervently thinking in one direction, and why did it shift? And I come to the conclusion that they felt deeply disappointed and anguished that when it came to us supporting them, them meaning the Palestinians, the causes of the Islamic world, we were not wanting. When it came to our own selves, Shankar was the foreign secretary in 2008. What did anyone constrain Pakistan? Did anyone go to Pakistan and say, the OIC say enough is enough? No. So people here then started.
No, I agree.
Your government.
I take your.
Did anyone say anything? So that too can't be overlooked.
No, but I take your point. The question is, that being the position, and I accept that, does it allow us to move away from our basic constitutional principles?
No.
Is the question.
I started with that, that we
But
have
then-
to
but then
adhere
why
to
should-
that.
Quite apart from the past, we are today in a very different context. We are not the only ones who are being transactional. Whether you look at the Middle East itself, you look at the behavior of the Sunni monarchies, look at what Turkey works with the US and Israel in Syria, but has other things to say on Iran, now speaks in support of Iran, etc. You look at the US themselves, you look at all the great powers. They're all so transactional, and there really is no international order to worth the word. I mean, you can't go to the Security Council and expect anything that means anything, any outcomes. So in that situation, I think to expect much more from us, I would say, I'm not even saying that you have to stand for certain values forever and ever, because I would say your interests demand that you take certain positions. Big country, you have people there. Right. You have other economic interests. You have strategic interests in the Gulf, in your region. You don't want adversaries exploiting that place. Using your own fissures, whatever they might be, whatever the sense of. So go out there and do something about it.
Right.
Work for that peace. Work that is in your interest. Chase your interests. Even that would lead you to do much more than I think I've seen us do in the recent past. Maybe it's going on under the surface. Maybe. I don't know. But
my
I don't see that. I don't see it in our articulation, maybe for reasons as
my impression has
said.
been, Shankar, that we've been using our foreign policy for domestic purposes. Right? And that worries me.
No, I think if it's led by domestic party political purposes, that is dangerous.
I get a feeling.
It will always have a domestic political element, because nobody is going to follow a foreign policy that doesn't work for their politics at home. But if it's led by that, and if you're then led to, calling Bangladeshis termites or things like that,
this is my feeling.
then that's where the problem starts. Where is the driving force behind your policy.
You want to take domestic
And
advantage
if
by
you
taking
take-
certain positions.
That's the problem.
Do you
May I
agree?
make a certain observation? See, there is a problem in the terminology that we use. Arab world, Islamic world. It gives the impression of a certain collectivity and a sense that they were likely to have certain shared or common positions. Neither of the two concepts actually exists in reality. OIC is a bogus organization, misused for purposes that serve certain members. But my own sense is, firsthand, 2008 was a crucial turning point in the approach of the Gulf to India. There was a deep sense of shock all across the region, a deep sense of sympathy for India. I was there, I was ambassador in Abu Dhabi and soon after that back in Saudi Arabia. We built up our strategic partnership on the basis of Mumbai. The Emiratis were particularly agitated. They talked to us, they wanted to know what happened. They were absolutely shocked. They asked me to make presentations on extremist Islam and jihad, which I did. I arranged for their teams to visit Mumbai, their intelligence team. They went to Mumbai because they thought if this can happen in Mumbai, it can happen to us. I would be slightly different here from Mr. Katju. I believe that the Arab Gulf country, I don't want to use the word Islamic world because I hate it. There is no such thing. But the Arab Gulf countries were extremely sympathetic to India. For them it was a personal tragedy. Many of them knew the Taj Hotel. Some of them were actually at the Taj Hotel. Some of them had grown up there. So I would say that we should look at it differently. I was able to push, and Mr. Menon was the National Security Advisor, will confirm, that the Saudis were anxious to build a strategic partnership founded on counter-terrorism as the base because of Mumbai.
I see.
And they came to us, and we have built up on that. Right. And we have done extremely well since then. With regard to our approach, I said values, I agree with that, and that is, to my mind, core values of a nation, which are personal to the nation, which have changed. There is no doubt about it. With regard to our larger interests, can anyone deny that we have crucial, long-standing, abiding interests in the stability of the Gulf?
Absolutely.
We have energy security, trade, investment, joint venture, 9 million people living there, $40 billion coming to India. Can you afford to have Fortress Delhi at a time when your neighborhood is aflame and where you allow everyone else to be active?
Right.
Today, look at the scenario. Who is not active in the Gulf? The Chinese certainly have become very, very robust. And I remember 10 years ago, I was talking to a Chinese academic after retirement. I said, look, we should be working together to promote peace and stability in the region. Your interests and mine are identical. He said, you know, we don't know this region. 2011, 2012, we don't know this region. You take the lead. You've been here 5,000 years. I have been here 5 years. We don't know the religion, we don't know the culture, we don't know the language. You take the lead, you hold our hand, and we will go together. That is promoting peace and stability. I'm telling you, this is a Chinese view. A very senior, older man, president of the Chinese Scholars, West Asian Scholars Association. I just asked him, by the way, Professor, how many members do you have in your association? He said, you know, a very small number. I'm embarrassed to mention it. I have just 1,000 members. 1,000 West Asian scholars in that country. They have worked so hard over the last 10 years. So I would say that we should be there. When the Chinese did the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, it was our show. We should have done that. But what the policies that we had earlier, when the Americans were hegemons, effective hegemons, we've continued. I have wished, and Mr. Katju and I have talked about it many times, we should be a little more proactive in terms of what is happening in the region.
Little more is, I think, too little. We should be far more proactive. But what's your view? Do you think our foreign policy sometimes, the reason for the positions we take is for domestic advantage?
Look, In my experience, there's an inextricable linkage between foreign and domestic policy, and all governments seek to take, to use your word, advantage of this linkage. The question is, what is your basic approach? It should not be personality driven. That is something that I'm convinced. I know that that personal chemistry is now a buzzword not only in international circles, and that leaders are in touch with each other all the time. But I still believe in the old methods of diplomacy. I think they yield results, and that personal equations can ease the way, perhaps sometimes significantly, but they can't be a substitute for hardcore national interest evaluation. They can't. And it is here that somehow diplomatically we seem to be relying more on
Personal equations.
on personal equations, and that personal equations will deliver. They have delivered in some cases they have not. Second, I think our worldview is getting a little more diffuse, if I may use the word. It's not, the world is moving very rapidly, and we somehow had anchored ourselves over the last few years to the Americans. With Trump, I don't think that anchor is getting completely eroded, but that anchor is being buffeted. It's being buffeted very greatly.
Yes.
And it's leaving people very insecure. I mean, you mentioned the lunch which Trump is hosting for Asim Munir. Now that, to my mind, is unprecedented, and therefore there will be many people here who will be wondering what is happening.
That's right.
So I think all in all, there are question marks now within the country on the directions that we are heading. There seems to be, and I think correctly, a greater focus on trade, investment, etc. That should remain. Geopolitically, we are in a Trumpian world, in a very disrupted world, and sometimes it appears we are scrambling.
Sad. I think my personal feeling is that there should be an element of continuity in foreign policy because it's civilizational in nature. We've had dealings with many of these countries for thousands of years. There is a perception that has developed towards India and our perception towards them. We've got deep interests especially in West Asia, and we shouldn't be looking as a non-player in this part of the world, right? And I also believe that our foreign policy mandarins in South Bloc should be driving our foreign policy and not the politicians of this country. With that, I thank you very much for being with me.
To that, I can only say hallelujah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.